We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
You are watching the press preview, first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with journalist Benjamin Butterworth and writer and broadcaster Esther Krakue. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Telegraph says that middle-class families could be facing higher water bills under new plans to subsidise those on lower incomes. The Observer leads with allegations of what are described as SAS killings of unarmed men and boys in Afghanistan, which the paper says were covered up. Sky News has asked for a response from the Ministry of Defence. The Times leads with an inquiry being ordered into how the identities of SAS personnel were leaked online. The Mail says that one of the Prime Minister's senior confidants, National Security Advisor Jonathan Powell, has been accused of involvement in running secret back channels to terrorist or rogue states through an organisation called Intermediate. The Express carries a report on figures which it says show that people coming to this country for free healthcare have cost the NHS £200 million in the last 5 years. The Sunday Mirror speaks to the father of murdered schoolboy Stephen Lawrence, who's urged one of his son's killers to tell the truth about what actually happened. The Star carries a scathing attack on Keir Starmer by TV actor and personality Danny Dyer, who says we need more ordinary people to run the country. And The Sun reveals that 2018 I'm a Celebrity winner Harry Redknapp is keen to get back into the jungle again. And we are joined tonight by Benjamin Butterworth and Esther Krakue to take us through the newspapers. We're not doing that last story.
Well, I mean, once you've had
we wonder why he's keen to go back in.
You can't really go back.
Right, the Telegraph, Sunday Telegraph front page, this story, middle class face higher water bills. How so, Benjamin?
So the government has done a review of the water industry and the way it works. A lot of people, there was a story a couple of days ago, I think, about how the number of leakages and the number of errors has gone up significantly in the last year, and bills have been going up considerably, despite the fact that we have water shortages at the moment. And so part of what this review is expected to suggest is that middle-class water users should pay an extra amount on their bills so that the poorest will get subsidies. Now, at the moment, lots of different water companies have their own schemes in order to help low-income people to be able to pay and cover their water costs. But the government is thinking about formalising this. That would mean that 2 million low-income people get those subsidies. Now, the Sunday Telegraph and Kevin Hollinrake, the Shadow Minister, the Conservative politician, has said that this would be an extra tax, an extra cost on hard-up families, which, of course, it would be. Now, we don't know exactly what the government's going to say. Steve Reed, who's the minister responsible, is just saying that it will be root and branch reform. But I think it's an interesting question because, you know, these prices are going up so rapidly, and much like food costs, for example, it's the people on the lowest incomes who are seeing the least movement in their income who are having these massive hikes on their bills while not being able to get the income to change it.
Esther, is this anything to do with those who use more water they'll face higher bills? For instance, you know, those that have swimming pools or have their sprinklers on continuously, are they going to be charged more? Is it going to be based
No,
on
that's not
that?
the nature of the scheme. It's more to kind of, you know, help struggling water companies. And unfortunately, in the court of public opinion, water companies are persona non grata, because we know that other than the fact that a lot of the money that they make is siphoned off to shareholders who don't have any stake realistically in the UK's private equity companies and sort of Qatar, Canada, and all of that. They're also quite poorly run. I mean, we constantly have debates about, you know, capping bonuses for water company bosses, which is just, you know, scratching the surface. I mean, some of these companies, like Thames Water, for example, are fined to the tune of £94 million. Putting a cap on a company executive of what, £500,000 is not really going to do very much. And unfortunately, this is not going to change the fact that these water companies are very terribly run, and taxing the public more, which is basically what it is going to go down like a lead balloon, regardless of which section of the public you're taxing.
But even, you know, those fines there've been a number of major fines on water companies recently, but in the previous year, despite there being hundreds of breaches accepted by the watchdog, there were no actual serious fines handed out. So even that is a step forward. You wonder whether, given there are so many failings by water companies, at least in the eyes of the public, could those fines be higher, and could those fines be paying for the social tariffs for people at the bottom end? Because while it's understandable and reasonable in many ways to say that you should be helping the poorest to pay their bills, actually the reality is that middle-class households are really struggling to cover these costs. They've gone through the roof. It's just fundamentally too expensive. And the government has ruled out nationalising water industries, which, on a practical level, you can see that the sheer cost of it would be many, many billions that quite clearly the government doesn't have. But it is a prime example of how in the last 40 years we have privatised the profit and nationalised the risk.
Yeah,
and it simply doesn't work, because everyone needs water.
Well, I mean, the biggest issue here is the fact that Ofwat didn't really have any teeth, any real regulatory powers when it was first established. And so you have this situation where it's now too expensive to nationalise these industries. These companies, first and foremost, have a primary duty to their shareholders. So I'm sorry if Doreen down the road has, you know, fecal matter floating in her nearest water body. Unfortunately, their responsibilities is to the Canadian private equity fund that they have to pay dividends to. So it's kind of the worst of both worlds. They're not going to nationalise it, but unfortunately, Ofwat doesn't really have the teeth to enforce any real regulatory powers.
And I don't think this will satisfy anyone. I mean, the government is having a real problem with looking like it's delivering change, things that people find tangible. I think failure to deal with things like the water industry is a classic example of where people would notice things being fixed, but it just seems too difficult, or they're not bold enough to do it.
So you think these moves won't satisfy anyone at all?
Well,
let's move on to
the
Times and Palestine Action. 100 arrests made by police, those out supporting Palestine Action in the streets over this weekend. Esther?
Yes, so Palestine Action were banned by the Home Office and designated a terrorist group on July 5th. And actually, in the first sort of wave of demonstrations, you had about 20 people that were arrested for supporting this group, which is now illegal because they're a prescribed terrorist group. And I think with this batch of arrests and protests, they're sending a message saying, we don't care, we still want to support Palestine Action. Now, the actual penalty for being arrested and charged with supporting a terrorist group ranges from between 6 months imprisonment or a £5,000 fine and up to 14 years in prison. Now, at any given moment, we don't even have 100 free spaces in our prisons because they're so overpopulated. So I think the point that they're making is they know that they're actually probably not going to face any serious penalties, at least not anytime soon. And it's just one of those unfortunate situations where the government has to be seen to be doing something, but really the reality of the situation is they can't do very much.
I mean, it poses a threat to the state and the police because they've introduced this law only recently. And so if they don't follow through on it, then it really undermines all sorts of other prescribed groups, which includes the likes of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Now, while I think Palestine Action's behaviour has been reprehensible and dangerous, and many people would say it's anti-Semitic, Jewish people certainly don't appreciate the way they've behaved, I'm not sure that prescribing them makes sense, because when you prescribe an international terrorist organisation, you're cutting people that support that off from the infrastructure, from the funding, from the powerful propaganda that they have. And someone in their bedroom in the UK can't recreate ISIS on their own. But with something like Palestine Action, a domestic group, what is to stop that being prescribed and then them just setting up the same goals with the same people under a new name, which isn't prescribed?
Yeah, exactly.
I think prescription was never meant for domestic groups. There are very few that have been prescribed. It's for international organisations. And so I think not only have they got this problem that it's really difficult to follow through on these prosecutions for obvious reasons, the scale of people breaking that law, but also actually once they've stopped making the principled point, not that I share their principle, all they need to do is change the name and they can carry on behaving that way. So I think it's deeply flawed.
So do you believe that they shouldn't be prescribed in the first place?
Well, I think their actions are clearly criminal, and I would say that attacking those planes as they did was terrorism. But the question is this the way to fix it? Well, no, because you just change the name, set up a new organisation, and they can carry on with the same behaviour. I think existing laws for the crimes that they've been accused of, that are alleged, would be the way to deal with it.
And also people see 100 arrests and just think, well, they're not going to do any prison time. I mean, you can't even get an arrest for someone who's actually stolen your phone and you've been able to track it to the location, let alone something like this.
100 people turn up in Bristol or Manchester or London every Saturday, and what, they're just, you're going to have 50,000 people or something, 5,000 people arrested in prison by the end of the year. It's a real problem on how unenforceable it is, and then you undermine the whole prescription process.
Yeah.
A final story before the break. The Express, and this is what's been dubbed NHS tourism, those coming back to the UK or popping in to get their medical complaints dealt with, costing £200 million to the NHS over the past 5 years, Esther.
I'll be honest, I expected it to be higher. Over 5 years, that's not as high a number. I guess because the public has been so used to hearing of, £8 billion on asylum hotels and, £7 billion on the Afghan scheme. When you hear this in context, it doesn't actually sound that outrageous. But yes, these are people that come to the UK for NHS treatment and then leave without paying and analysing the cost to the NHS. I think the bigger issue is just the kind of swell of the population, the number of people that are using the NHS on a regular basis because they're residents of the UK and have the right to do that. I think that's a bigger scandal. This, I think, 10, 15 years ago would have been a much bigger issue, but I think kind of post-Brexit, these kinds of stories don't really drum up as much ire in the public because I think things have got so much worse on so many other fronts. Yeah, so I used to read stories like this all the time in sort of the early 2010s about health tourism in the UK, and it was a massive issue and it was one of the drivers, I think, behind kind of inflamed rhetoric around immigration and uncontrolled immigration and obviously later on Brexit. But now, just when you put 200 million, you just think, actually, we're seeing much bigger forms of waste and reckless spending and public spending, that this probably doesn't scratch the eye of as many people as you would think.
Yeah, and people that move to this country have to pay an NHS surcharge of £1,000, which, for lots of young people that are coming here for work, which is a considerable number of migrants, that's a serious amount of money they're paying, and they still have to pay income tax and national insurance that the rest of us would for their level of income. And so, actually, I think the system is not profoundly unfair, and I think since those headlines you talk about, there have been lots of things introduced to fix that. But we often forget that, people moving here have paid that £1,000 to access the NHS on top of the taxes that we all pay.
OK, Benjamin and Esther, thank you very much for taking us through the papers so far. We'll take a break. Coming up, is anti-Semitism now rife in our schools? We'll be discussing that story from the Sunday Telegraph next. Stay with us.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war.
This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Omdurman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, journalist Benjamin Butterworth and writer and broadcaster Esther Krakue. We're going to take a look at the Telegraph front page and this story suggesting that anti-Semitic abuse is rife in schools and this being according to teachers, Benjamin.
Yeah, this is actually quite a shocking story. We're aware that anti-Semitism has been rising ever since the October 7th attacks, but this paints a much worse picture than maybe people imagined. So the Women's Teachers Union has found that half of Jewish teachers have faced abuse of an anti-Semitic nature. I won't say the exact phrase that the paper uses, but it's derogatory about the fact that they're Jewish. A third of those teachers say that they don't feel they can report it within their schools, which suggests there's an institutional aspect to this. And then the government has reported, the report has found that, a government report found, that 40% have seen swastikas graffitied in their schools. Now, I mean, that absolutely blows my mind. Maybe lots of Jewish viewers would say it doesn't surprise them, they're far more aware of how bad it is. But the idea that, you know, something like a swastika could be vaguely normalised, and this report finds that anti-Semitism in schools does seem to have been normalised in schools, is an incredibly bad sign, because what it says is, you know, the Free Palestine movement, which obviously has some, you know, legitimate reasons and concerns, but it has led to this kind of anti-Semitic abuse, this kind of free-for-all. And you have to ask questions of how kids are feeling that they can get away with this if there are no consequences. This report says that even teachers, the Jewish teachers, feel they can't report what's happening because they might face issues from their colleagues. And so, you know, this suggests to me that the government has to do something to put these teachers, these schools, in line so that it doesn't continue.
I mean, this is shocking. As you say, 44% of Jewish teachers reported swastika graffiti appearing at their school since May 2023, and 39% have witnessed all been subject to Nazi-related comments.
Yeah, and the scary thing is this is part of a pattern that we're seeing. We've already seen police forces report a rise in anti-Semitic related incidents, hate incidents, for example. The recent report by Penny Mordaunt and the Labour politician whose name escapes me, unfortunately, recently said that anti-Semitism is becoming normalised in the middle class as well. So you're seeing this consistently amongst all sorts of polling and reports and data that's coming out, that actually anti-Semitism is becoming more normalised across swaths of society. And it is quite frightening. It's difficult what the government can do, because what they've noticed is the spike happened after the October 7th attacks, which you would think, particularly in the immediate aftermath, it would be the opposite. But I've spoken to leaders or Jewish leaders and teachers in Jewish schools, and they've said exactly the same thing in parts of North London, which have significant Jewish populations, that they're seeing exactly the same thing, and they've had to actually tighten security because of this heightened concern. And it's difficult what the government can do about it, because obviously we do have, at least on some level, free speech in this country, but this is clearly unacceptable.
I mean, it just horrifies me. You know, a friend of mine who's Jewish, and his kids are obviously Jewish, was saying about how one of his children had their school prom recently. And he said, I've lost count of how many emails we've had about security for getting the kids in and out of the school prom. I know another Jewish person who said their kids have had to been told not to wear their kippahs or to have their school blazer, which has the Star of David on, when they're going to and from school. You know, this is horrifying, and it is normalised. You know, there are perfectly legitimate questions and concerns about the behaviour in Gaza, but for no other country's misbehaviour do you see people in this country facing abuse, kids facing that abuse, people in their workplace. Yeah. And it is so concerning. But the reason it's so hard to confront is precisely because it's become normal. It is controversial to call it out in these situations. And I think that is a very worrying place to be.
I don't know if it's controversial to call it out.
I think it is, because it's so casual, right? There is obviously, a swastika would be straightforward to call out. But there is so much casual anti-Semitism going on. You know, when Russia invaded Ukraine, no one said Russia shouldn't exist. But you get people saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which is a call to get rid of the state of Israel, to wipe out the only Jewish state. That is normal. Confronting that, at least among lots of sort of middle-class lefties I know, gets me as a pariah. And how we've got into a situation where it is unacceptable to speak and defend the Jewish state, and that Jewish people who could have a whole range of views on the state of Israel's actions are facing abuse simply because of their ethnicity, is an appalling state to be, and it's happened in 2.5 years.
It is certainly a terrifying time for a lot of Jewish people who actually feel unsafe now in the UK. Let us have a look at the Times. This is the Ryanair story. We heard, actually, a while back, it was in the news that they get bonuses for, penalising those who have bags that are essentially too heavy. What's the news story?
This caused riots, quite frankly, because I suspected as much, and unfortunately my suspicions have been confirmed. So Ryanair apparently pays bonuses to staff who catch any of its 200 million passengers a year who try to travel with oversized cabin luggage, which I find personally deeply offensive. I mean, you have to sell a limb, basically, to get extra baggage because someone is going to get a bonus on it. It's incredibly stingy. It's so ridiculous. I mean, why would you incentivise people to just be nuisances because someone has to have, like, a bigger bag to take a weekend trip to somewhere in Europe? It's ludicrous.
Well, remember, historically, the bonuses aren't very large, so...
Yeah,
but that's what makes it worse.
But that adds up with
that's what makes it
passengers.
worse.
Benjamin, thank you so much for taking us through the papers. Oh, we have time still, actually. I was taking us out, but we can do one more newspaper.
Can I continue?
OK, yes, continue on your point.
Ryanair made more than 13 billion euros in revenue last year. This is completely unnecessary. This is completely ridiculous.
But people know the rules. Obviously, the business model of low-cost airlines is the reason that your ticket was maybe £40 to go to Spain is because they make the money on the bags. And so if you can't get it into the small space, and, I've been on holiday with just a backpack, you can get a reasonable amount in. If you're going for a weekend.
What about makeup? True. What about makeup? What about all the essentials?
Yeah,
exactly. As for a woman, absolutely not.
Yeah, Esther turned up with a 2-week bag just for her makeup for this show, so...
I didn't hear that.
I don't know what the holiday is.
No, what happened? The hate speech we're talking about.
days off there.
It's the hate speech that we're talking about.
But people understand the business model, right? And actually,
I
you
don't
know,
understand.
people that work in sales, obviously you're paid by commission to deliver a profit for the company. And I suspect
Do you want to hear how much they were paid per oversized bag?
What was
Just
it?
so you know how cheap they are to grass us out like this. £1.30.
But do you know what? If you're working for Ryanair, I imagine your wages
130 pence.
I imagine your wages aren't particularly high in the first place, so this would be very helpful.
Buy a stick of gum.
Esther and Benjamin, stop the rowing. Thank you both for taking us through the papers. Much more to come on Sky News at 11. Do stay with us.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.